Okay, 7th grade, 3 minutes is going on the timer for your 10 ready activator. For each of these following 3 passages, you need to identify whether the text is fiction, nonfiction, or poetry. For each one, you need to write that on the line, and then you need to have one complete sentence explaining, and I give you a possible sentence then. I say fiction because, I say nonfiction because, or I say poetry because. Explain what about the text clues you in on the type of genre that it is. 3 minutes is going on my timer for your activator, and begin. Okay, and that is time. As you looked over each of these texts, you should have been able to tell within the first 1 to 2 sentences or even the title what type it was. I Have a Dream speech by Dr. Martin Luther King. Cannot be fiction. It's not a made-up story. It's obviously not a poem. Nonfiction. You could have said, I say nonfiction because speeches are presenting information and true facts. Any sort of explanation over why this was nonfiction. Number 2, Polly sits tight. Already I can tell this is not going to be poetry based on the text. It's either going to be fiction or nonfiction. Let's read the first sentence. Polly held her breath and sat rigid. Sounds like a character. Sounds like some sort of conflict. I know this is a made-up short story. Fiction. Again, make sure that you have explained. You could have said, I say fiction because it's a made-up story, because there are characters, a conflict, and a plot. Anything that explains why it's fiction. Finally, number 3, 6 students walk from Mississippi to Tennessee to honor MLK. I can already tell from the title this is going to be a newspaper article presenting information. Nonfiction, again, make sure you have your explanation. So just to review, our 3 answers were nonfiction, fiction, and nonfiction. Remember that as you're going into 10 Ready next week, we only have 5 days left. So the rest of this week, you're going to see Monday, Tuesday, you're going to get practice 10 Ready classwork practice. Wednesday, we're going to have what's called sort of a cold test, where you're going to come in and you're going to have a chance to see an actual 10 Ready practice test that's going to be timed based on fiction passages. So Monday, Tuesday, fiction practice. Wednesday is going to be an actual 10 Ready test in class. So be ready for that on Wednesday. Thursday and Friday is going to be 2 more Edpuzzle lessons. You're going to see the shift to Edpuzzle because we're making a shift in ELA towards more independent. With 10 Ready coming up next week, I'm really coming around, and as I check over your paper and as I conference quickly with you, you should be tracking yourself so you know which questions you miss. You should know which parts of the text were challenging for you. That's how you should be tracking yourself as you go throughout the Edpuzzle lessons this week. But I just wanted you to have an overview of what this last week of instruction before 10 Ready is going to look like. So let's imagine you're sitting down on the 10 Ready test, and you get the same text you saw on the activator, Polly sits tight. And we read the first sentence. You should have labeled on your text that this is F fiction. Remember your annotations as you go to label characters, setting, problem, and lesson learned. I'm going to model this for you in the first maybe 1, 2, or 3 paragraphs, and then for the rest of the text, you should be annotating as you go. Also, you should have at the bottom a gist statement. Remember, a gist statement is just saying what this text was mainly about. So you could say, this story, if I were you, I would set up my paper right when I get it, was mainly about, and you're going to want to summarize what this story was, who and what this story was mainly about. Not just who. You shouldn't say the story was mainly about Polly. There should be a who and a what. So now that I've got my paper set up, I'm ready to start reading. Again, make sure you're getting your annotations. And I'm going to read the first paragraph and then pause. Polly, circle it, label it C. Any new details we learn about Polly, we're also going to label C. Held her breath and sat rigid. For the third time, the teacher had asked the question, and the last time, he had looked directly at her. She knew the answer, too. It was an undisputed fact in room 11 that any time there came a question no one else could answer, a little black girl with stubborn hair, okay, so we just learned that Polly, character, she's black, with stubborn hair and a voice like a lilting melody would be sure to know. Polly was the star scholar in the class. That's an important detail. She's a good student. And although she seemed unconscious of her brilliancy, her intelligence, her teacher and her classmates were not. So already, even though it doesn't tell us, but we can infer, we can underline here, room 111 is the setting. We're in a classroom. Let's read a couple more paragraphs. So now that the question had been asked for the third time and Polly's hand had not been raised, all the boys and girls turned to look at her in genuine surprise. I noticed that if all the students are turning to look at her because she's not raising her hand, there's sort of a problem or a conflict here, so I'm going to label that P. Paragraph 3. And Polly's heart was beating rapidly within her because she did know the answer. She had worked until late and had gone to bed determined to rise early in the morning and tackle the problem again. But about 2 o'clock, she found herself sitting bolt upright in bed, saying to the darkness, "Of course, that is the way it goes." And she lay back into untroubled sleep. Now it happened that Polly's mother was painfully poor. Underline that, label that P. And also that shoes had an annoying habit of wearing out beyond repair. Today, Polly had worn her mother's shoes and would probably have to wear them several days, perhaps weeks, until someone gave her a pair, or until she could save up enough money to buy her own. I'm going to underline and label that a problem that she's having to wear her mother's old shoes. The latter way meant a long wait, for there was food, rent, fuel, and insurance, and her mother's health was breaking, so that Polly herself worked afternoons to help out. So already we've got some conflict here. Polly comes from a family without a lot of money. She's having to wear her mother's shoes, and then she's also having to work late. I imagine she might feel a little insecure about wearing her mother's shoes. I'm going to take a very quick pause. Don't forget to be answering these TDQs while you're actually reading. I'm not going to model that since we did that so much last week, but remember to be working through those as you read. I'm going to keep reading through paragraph 5. Polly thought of her report card, in the row of A's. Not that she had been a grind to make it so, but she had come to be proud of her record and of the pride her class had in her. She knew the solution, but it meant going to the board to demonstrate it. That would expose her shoes. There's her big problem. She's embarrassed about her shoes. The teacher was still looking at her expectantly. Polly dropped her eyes to her desk, and her glance fell on her paper-covered books, much marked after the manner of school girls and boys. These words met her gaze. "Sit tight, little girl, sit tight." That was her motto. Important part of the plot. Her dad, character, had given it to her unconsciously, and it had always come to her rescue. Paragraph 7. When she was a very little girl, she had been playing with some children in the barn. Tiring of the usual games, one boy had suggested riding horseback. As fate would have it, the most restive horse appealed to them, and Polly was victim. Circle the word restive. Restive means like most difficult. Like the most difficult to control. So Polly's going to ride on this horse that's difficult to control. Let's see what happens. From frequent pulling against his strap, it had weakened, and frightened by the children boosting Polly to its back, the horse gave 2 or 3 vicious tugs, and the strap broke. Problem. Before anyone realized what was happening, he backed out of the stall and out of the barn and started away on a brisk gallop. Polly's father was working in a field nearby and, sensing what had happened, cupped his hands and called through them, "Sit tight, little girl, sit tight." I'm going to underline that because that repeats from before. And Polly sat tight until her father on a swift horse overtook her and brought her back to safety. Polly remembered little else of her father. He died soon after. There's a problem. But that command hurled at her in time of danger had always stayed with her. It didn't take the tiniest fraction of a second for all these things to flash through her mind. False pride was galloping away within her. What was a pair of overlarge shoes against the faith the 20-odd persons in the room had in her? And what of her mother's faith in her, and her own? Would they laugh at her? Then let them. Like an electric flash, her hand went up. The tension in the room was broken. "All right, Polly. I knew you could. Come to the board, please." And not one person saw her shoes. They just saw a black girl with a beaming face, mouth tightly shut, head held high, go to the board and quietly, but quickly and thoroughly demonstrate the solution of the problem that had baffled them all. But Polly saw her father trumpeting through his hands. I'm going to mark this as a lesson learned, because I noticed that even though Polly was really self-conscious of her shoes, even though she felt embarrassed and nervous to go up, she really still had the courage. So here's what I'm going to do. If you have not finished getting your TDQs for the first part of today's Edpuzzle lesson, or you have not gotten your gist statement summarizing what this article is about, or there's any annotations you still need to get, take the next 4 minutes to be working through your TDQs and your actual text. Begin. Okay, at this time, excuse me. If you are not fully finished with your TDQs, be sure you're pacing yourself. That really should take only about 5 to 6 minutes to really work through this. Remember, on 10 Ready, it is going to be timed, even though you're not going to have TDQs that look exactly like this. Part of what you're working on is pacing. Check your answers as you go. Title, we know, Polly sits tight. Fic, you should have identified that this was fiction. Main character is Polly. Setting of the story is in a schoolroom. What do you learn about Polly? We learned that she was a very smart student and she's a good scholar. Why are the other boys and girls surprised in the class? They're surprised because she's the smartest student. She's not getting up to answer the question. The item of clothing that she's wearing and she feels embarrassed about are her shoes. The problem or conflict that she faces in the story is that she feels embarrassed over her shoes because she can't afford to buy new ones. She doesn't want her classmates to see. Her motto is sit tight, or what was it exactly? Sit tight, little girl, sit tight. She got this motto from her father when she was stuck on top of a horse and she was scared. What does Polly do in the classroom in this story? She goes up to the board and she actually answers the question. She gathers that bravery and that strength within her from remembering when her father helped her. All right, so go ahead and flip to task number 1. Before I give you your directions, I want you to actually look at number 4 because there's a mistake in number 4. Everybody please turn to number 4. Number 4 says select 2 lines. That should just say select 1 line. That would affect your explanation over here where it says I chose answer choice blank and blank. Cross that out. I chose answer choice. 1 answer choice for number 4. As you're getting into your task today, you're going to be using the 5 steps of question analysis that we've practiced before to answer each of these questions. So for example, let me model for you how I would start doing number 1, and then you're going to work through each of them on your own. Step 1 is list 2 to 3 keywords in the question. Keywords: Polly's memory, father. How does Polly's memory, father, and then I'm also going to say impact. I know impact means like, how does it affect her? So I'd come over to this line, and I would write, keywords are Polly's memory, father, impact. Number 2 is asking, is the question multiple choice or multiple select? I know it's only asking me to choose 1 answer, so it's MC, multiple choice. What is the question asking? I would just put it in my own words. I would say, the question is asking. I could say any range of things. I could say, the question is asking how Polly's memory of her dad affects her in the story, or how her memory of what happened to her affects her in the story. You put it in your own words. Step 4, you're going to cross out wrong answers, and it says list the wrong answer choices here, just the letter. And finally, you're going to explain. I chose answer choice blank because if it's a question like this, you're going to cite a piece of evidence from the text. If it's an evidence question, tell me which one is the correct one and why. My biggest piece of advice for you as you're working through these 10 ready questions, always look back in the text before you choose an answer. Some of you, when I've come to conference with you at the end and I asked you, why did you pick answer choice A? Is there any evidence to support that? You say, oh no, Mr. Wilson, I don't know why I picked that. You need to cross out the answers that you know have no evidence to support it. If you're not sure on an answer choice, move to the next one. Try to get it down to 2. Every answer choice you rule out will increase your odds of getting that question correct. But again, you need to be thinking which one of these best shows how Polly's memory of her dad affects her in this passage. So you need to be looking back in the text once you choose your answer or before you cross out an answer. You're going to do questions 1 and 2, and then over here to 3 and 4. Once you have fully finished questions 1, 2, 3, and 4, you're going to check your answers So you're going to do task 1, task 2, and then you're going to check your answers when you get to task 3. That's where you're going here. So I'm going to go ahead and put 10 minutes on the timer for you to be working through task 1, task 2, check your answers, and then complete task 3. 10 minutes is going on the timer, and begin. Okay, if you have not fully finished task 1 and task 2, please pause your video at this time. Again, if you have not fully finished task 1 and task 2, please pause your video at this time so you can finish getting your 5 steps of question analysis to numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Please pause your video if you are not finished with 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once you've finished for those who are ready, go ahead and take a look at your correct answers for task 1 and 2. Please copy down the answer key and then go ahead and complete your reflection. Please take note of the questions that you missed, circle the correct answers, and complete your reflection. Again, for number 3, it's asking you what skills, look next to the question, did you struggle with? Take the next couple minutes to complete your reflection. Go. That is time. If you are not finished with your reflection, task 3, go ahead and finish it now. But we're moving into the extended exit ticket. You have one more passage to be reading, and you've got just 4 questions over it after you finish your sort of annotation questions. This last 10 minutes is going to be for your extended exit ticket. 10 minutes to finish that exit ticket. And begin. If you need more time on your exit ticket or to check back over your whole packet, please do so now. Make sure that I have checked it and I've given you your grade for today. But overall, excellent, excellent work.